Hi, and welcome to the Team Deakins podcast. This podcast is a dialogue between Roger and James Deakins, often joined in the conversation by a guest. It's very informal, and we never know where it will go. We're connecting through Zoom, so bear that in mind when you hear the audio. If you'd like to submit a question or topic, please do so by emailing pod, P-O-D, at rogerdeakins.com. Today we have a cinematographer and a friend with us. He shot many films, a few of them being Bright Star, Zero Dark 30, Snow White and the Huntsman, Star Wars Rogue One, and is currently working on The Batman. We're very pleased to welcome Greig Fraser. Greig, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure.
Tell us, just to start out, how you got to where you are now. Did you always want to be a cinematographer?
No, I didn't actually know what a cinematographer did. And I didn't realize that there was such a thing as a cinematographer when I was coming up in high school. You know, I did media arts and I did photography, so I knew what a photographer did. That's very easy to understand. And I knew what a videographer did because I saw people on the news, with their cameras at sports events. But the idea of a cinematographer, I didn't really have much of an understanding of their role on a movie. I joined when I was kind of in second year university, I joined a photography/film studio in Melbourne called Exit Films that primarily did advertising-based commercials or editorial photography, and met the filmmakers there. Met some really fantastic filmmakers that were kind of up and coming and really passionate about what they did. And one of the things that I loved about filmmaking as opposed to photography was it was a very communal event. You know, it was everybody got involved and 1 + 1 often equaled 20. Sometimes it equaled less than 2,
right.
but you know, for the most part, you know, everybody contributing on the right wavelength was greater than the sum of its parts. So it was a very enjoyable doing that. So I looked at those guys and went, you know what, I'm going to veer towards that world. Again, not knowing what a cinematographer did. I knew what a director did. I knew what an assistant director did. I knew what a director's assistant did. I knew what a producer did. So I started working on some shoots as a loader or a runner and saw the cinematographer work and go, that's a very interesting job because they have such an important role in the final look of this production. But I didn't have any idea what they were, you know, so I watched that. I watched them. I knew my photography background. And then I started watching some films with that in mind. And there was one particular film that I watched that I put 2 and 2 together and went, oh, this is what I do as a photographer. And that was Ratcatcher, which was Alvin Kutcher and Lynn Ramsey. And it was a very simple movie and very simply shot and all based on still frames as opposed to moving frames and cranes. That was a bit beyond my scope of understanding at that point in time about how to move a camera to create emotion. But it was a lot of still frames that I went, I'm getting an emotional reaction to this. And as a sequence, I realized that from there I could take what I knew photography was and build an understanding of film. So from that point, that's when I devoured every single film that we all love. And like I remember sitting at home for weeks at a time, self-quarantining actually, just watching 8 films a day, 9 films a day. And just becoming—
You've had practice.
Yeah, just becoming a complete filmophobe. Now, as a result of that, unfortunately, a lot of the films that I saw, I can't name or tell you specific scenes in particular films that have this emotion, but it was just an absorption. It was like a young person absorbing, you know, a new language or something. And then from there started to shoot small commercials for my friends, small music videos, you know. But in that time too, it was all film because, you know, there was no digital learning. So a lot of it was on the job learning. A lot of it was me borrowing short ends out of the refrigerator of the production company and going out and filming something at the end of the day with someone else's kit and just learning sort of what an exposure does. But James, it's really funny because I was listening to your episode 1 and 2, and I think we're very similar in a lot of respects, because in year 11 and 12, I was also debating whether or not to study economics, because to me, there's this beautiful human reaction that goes along with theoretical economics, not practical economics, not numbers and figures and all that, but the reactionary process that goes on when someone has extra cash in their pocket. What do? What happens with a broad group of people? It was so exciting to me, and it's funny listening to you going, yeah, I was that far away from becoming an economist.
Until I learned what it entailed, but yes.
That's probably what steered me away from it, was the actual practicalities of it, yeah.
You grew up in Australia, right?
Yes, I grew up in Melbourne, in a suburb of Melbourne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the beginning of your career was in Australia.
We had a Melbourne, when I was coming up through, had a really fantastic resurgence, I guess, of creative advertising, and which led to creative music videos. And obviously we were led by London. London was always a kind of the head mecca of creativity, with the Jonathan Glazers and the guys all working out of London from an advertising perspective. But Melbourne had this little thing going on that I felt was really conducive to people getting together and filming stuff, and again, hearing from your podcast, like, people ask, well, how do I get started? What do I do? How do I and it's like, my reaction to that when I get asked is, well, I don't know your situation. I don't know where you are, which part of America you're in. I don't know your finances. But what I do know is that if you just seek out people whose work you like, and then push and push and push and push and try and work with them, then you become a collaborator with someone whose work you like, and then you become better, they become better, and the whole world is sort of,
better,
privy to your skill. I mean, I remember multiple times seeing directors work in music videos and mailing them a VHS copy of my reel and writing them a letter going, hey, I'd love to work with you. I saw, this music video, and can we work together?
So when did you come over to the States?
My wife and I, who were not married at the point in time, we came over in 2009. We just finished a run of 3 films, The Boys Are Back, Last Ride, and Bright Star, and we'd done 3 films in a row, sort of back to back. So I was pretty exhausted at that point in time, and we were pretty ready to make a change. It's that itchy feet, aiming for something that you have not had, and especially when you're younger. So we moved to LA very, very soon after that, and that's when I met you guys and Bev Wood, and and I love that podcast, by the way. I listened to that so many times. I love Bev. Bev could talk for hours. I can just hear her talking for hours.
I know. Yeah.
But how did just go back a little bit? How did you get a first break doing feature work? You were doing videos and commercials, were you? Promos, as we used to call them.
In Australia, there was public funding for short features. So there were, on some of the public channels, there were short features, 50-minute features. So I'd done a few short films. I did a short film that won a Palme d'Or in Cannes in 2003. So that was kind of cool, like to be in Cannes and watching, some of your heroes walking down the Croisette eating baguettes and having a chat, I was like, ooh la la. And so,
was that with a director that you worked with on music videos, or?
Yeah, and on commercials, and
yeah.
And exactly. And I also then did a film with him, The Last Ride. Glendon Ivan is his name.
Right.
That
was great. Yeah. That was a great film.
That was a great film.
Beautifully shot film. If anybody's not seen it, they should.
I mean, there's a lot of talent. And Glendon didn't make the move physically to America, but he's doing, he's doing some TV shows in Australia and the UK. Like, he's an incredibly talented man, and there's a lot of great talent in Australia, because Australians are a little bit like the Brits in some ways. Like, some of them have the urge to travel, and some don't. But the skill level is still there. The problem is in Australia, without wanting to be negative on it, unfortunately the market's smaller, which means that the opportunities that arise are unfortunately smaller. And it doesn't mean the quality is any less, because the people doing it are equally as talented. It's just the opportunities are not as not as great, not as big.
Yeah.
Do you find a difference in working with an Australian crew and working with an American crew?
Well, the biggest part that I had to deal with actually was how the grips and the gaffers work, which is to me I still have problems with it actually, because it's the delineation of labor, and when you work, as you guys know, like when you go to different countries, like Budapest works differently to London, works differently to Los Angeles, works different to New York.
Yes.
And listen, it's a small thing ultimately, because ultimately the end goal is that you steer through all that. But it's a bit of a problem when you're turning to your gaffer and requesting, a bounce here, and you've got a personality maybe on set that gets offended that you're it's a it's a political game, and it's one of the biggest problems that I had early on, and I didn't quite understand it. Luckily, I had some very good grips on my first feature. Kurt Korneman, who I believe you worked with on True Grit, I think he was one of your local New Mexican grips, I believe.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to kind of school me, and I tried to go, well, why would you do that? Like in the UK, I just got off a film where we put blue gel onto the arms of a Wendy and he was like, well, that's not how we do it here. It's like, but wouldn't that be better? He went, no, it wouldn't be better because we don't understand that. I'm like, okay, good point. Good point. It's a good point. Like you work on the system that you best work with, and then it becomes efficient. So yeah, I get that. I'm not on the floor doing the physicalities. So,
but sometimes you got to try something new, because then it's another tool in your toolbox.
Well, that's right. That's right. And also too, what I found in Australia was that I love the system that happens in Australia, and that's not being biased, because I've now thankfully worked in all the countries, and I know you guys worked in Australia as well. So, the system where you have a very solid grip that concentrates on a certain series of jobs, and a gaffer that concentrates on a certain series of jobs. I find that system the most efficient. But again, it's not about me all the time. It's about the people who are, I've trusted to make the system work. How did you find that in Australia, Roger?
In the end, well, I was going to say, I think in the end, it's the people. I mean, we had a wonderful time in Australia. I mean, we couldn't have had a better crew, and obviously I've gone between working the different systems, so it didn't really bother me. Most important thing to me is the people and the kind of collaboration, and we had a great crew, didn't we?
Yeah.
I'd go back there as a flash, really, if I get the chance, but.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully with the dollar dropping and the fact that it's the only place in the world that is safe to shoot at the moment, who knows? Who knows?
Right. Yeah, right.
Do you tend to work with the same crew?
I try to. I have thankfully some very good crew in all the major continents.
Right.
It's not always feasible to take a focus puller, for me anyway, or an electrician or a grip. It just becomes untenable for production sometimes. So if that's the case, I've managed to work out who my crew is in most of the major centers. And it's all about personality. Do you know what I mean? Like you need.
Yes.
It's like the thing is that unfortunately film crews, and I'm being general here. So I apologize to anyone that's offended by this, but a lot of the grips and electrics have been kind of bolshy and Boise and like a little loud. Not again being very general, so I apologize, but that there's a general consensus of a type that I've met over the years that I feel like I don't play well with, that don't bring anything to a set, that don't help the actors ultimately achieve their goal, and so I'm always on the lookout for crew that can get their job done, can do it with class, can do it quietly, that treat the guys well. I have an amazing, beautiful focus puller in London named Jake Markison, who I've worked with since 0 Dark 30, who I love to bits. And we did Mary Magdalene together, and and the hair and makeup test, I introduced him to Joaquin, And Joaquin's a very fantastic actor and very insular and very focused, and so we're very careful not to get into his space and to be and I introduced him at the beginning, and every day there was a little bit of interaction, but very, very little. And at the end of the shoot, Joaquin came up to me after he'd shaved his beard off and he'd suddenly become Joaquin again and not Jesus. And he goes, dude, I was at the rap party last night. By the way, I wasn't at the rap party because I was ill. He goes, I was at the rap party last night and I met your focus puller and your camera team for the first time last night. I said, Joaquin, no, I'm sorry. I introduced you, mate. I apologize. I felt really bad. And he goes, oh, I didn't know who they were. And I'm like, I texted my guys and girls and went, success, 100%. Forget what you did for focus.
Yeah.
Forget what you did for everything else. But you absolutely made my day. It made me look amazing because I was able to introduce crew to that production that aided the actor. And that was the most visible sign of that I've ever experienced. And I was really proud of it.
Yeah.
I think, too, that your crew represents you. And I know oftentimes if we have someone new, I'll take them aside and explain that concept to them. So what we like is if there's a problem for the crew to go to production with a positive attitude, not, no, I've got to have this. It's okay. We have this problem. The only way I can see out is this. What do you, to have that kind of collaborative approach to production because they are representing us too.
They completely do.
But it's also that working together. I mean, when I first came to the States to do a film that was totally in the States, I didn't really get on with the crew I had, I've got to say. And the director changed, but I stayed. So the first thing I did was got on a phone to somebody I'd worked with on Sid and Nancy quite a few years before, who had basically been a practical electrician. And I asked him to come and gaff with me because I got on with him so well. And I've basically worked with him ever since, off and on. Mm-hmm. He can't work so much in LA now, and he doesn't obviously work in England, but anything I've done East Coast, and he was gaffer on Blade Runner as well. And it's, you form a relationship with somebody, and then in my case, it was meeting Billy on Sid and Nancy when he was just doing practicals, and it was like, you could say, well, how are we going to do this? What do you think? And he'd always have an idea. It was always open to something new, and it was just that very low-key way of just kind of working together, which, that's what it is. You relate to somebody and you stick with them, don't you?
Well, and also sometimes when we're going to another location and we've got to pick up a local key or something, they'll always want to send you very experienced resumes, and you always ask for also the younger, less experienced, because there's a certain kind of passion oftentimes, and you need that passion to figure things out as you're going along.
Yeah, it's also, I remember talking to Conrad Hall with a gaffer that worked with Conrad Hall, and the amount of equipment they were used to put up, the amount of lighting rigs they did, the complexity of it. But things are very different now, aren't they? You I think you, like me, you're quite specific about what you want. So it's not a case of rigging a set with wrapping it around with 110Ks or something. It's like being very specific. You can't do that nowadays. The film industry is just not like that.
Yeah.
So you need somebody that's open to the challenge of doing things in new ways, don't you?
Exactly. And also to that point, also the people that are able to embrace new technology as well, because this world right now that we're in is evolving so quickly, from digital cameras through to digital lighting, started with the DI and then digital cameras and digital lighting and digital desks. And, there's the technology is evolving so, through to, virtual reality shooting of like on Mandalorian. So there's making sure that the people that you have are solid and relatively experienced, but also open to change, because there's nothing worse than having one of my favorite lights that I use is a bit of a funky interface. It's not the most user-friendly empty, you just pick it up and turn it on. Like it's a little tricky, but I love it. I love the color quality, and I love the way it works on skin. And to me, it's a true test of skill and workability as a team for somebody to go, I can't stand this light, but I know you love it, and I will learn it. And or I can't stand this lens. Maybe there's a lens that I can't stand, that my focus puller can't stand because it never lines up, or it's something, but there's something about it that I love for a certain shot. And obviously there's a point where if they come to me pleading, hat in hand, please don't use this lens, then that's a different story. I need to be considerate of that.
Well, you're a big proponent of LED lights, right? You like them a lot?
Generally, for a lot of things, yeah.
Raj, I'm going to leave that to you to question because you're less of a proponent.
I use LED lights, but not anything to the extent you do, I don't think. I tend to fall back on things that I kind of more comfortable with, I guess. But, I mean, it's tools for situations, isn't it?
I had a very fortunate situation occur when I did Rogue One, and that was that I was on prep and that start date kept pushing. So when that happens, you get a chance to test and look at things. And we had a long prep, and we had a long sort of a start date that was going to occur way in the future. So I was able to test a number of lens, camera configurations, and lighting configurations. And I just discovered some really interesting things with LEDs that I really enjoyed. Like I love the fact that with LEDs you can color time the LEDs on set. So, for example, we did a shot on Batman a few weeks before we broke, where we'd shot outside in London, a dawn shot or dusk shot, I think, and we were using that exterior plate, and then the interior we were going to build a window. But we built the windowsill around it. We had to create the same coloured light going through the window so that it matched. So I did the ceiling light, nice soft source, and my colorist came in. My colorist had the dailies, and then he had the panel that the dimmer board op normally uses, but he got on it and started colour timing the lights. So then suddenly the ambience matched exactly the plate shot. So
wow,
and that's one example. One of the powerful elements of LEDs is you need all of them LEDs, which is hard to find because there's not enough quantity, and you don't have the range of spotlight cutters. So currently, it's mostly soft light, but the ability to three-dimensionally grade a set, I've found really interesting, and to be able to space lights one, the side lights another, and just to be able to kind of refine and tune during the pre-light, obviously not on the shoot day because then you'll drive everyone batty, but so I found that to be really powerful. Although I must say, I just lit a set with were they Wendy lights? No, the 24 light.
Dinos,
there you go. Because we had to bounce into a massive white bounce and we couldn't use LEDs. And the lighting quality was beautiful. I mean, it just reminded me about the quality of tungsten. And I just went, oh yeah, I've got to refine that love. Yeah.
I mean, what you're saying is absolutely right. Well, the thing is, you've got the control of the LED, of the color and the shift, if it's something that subtle. But on the other hand, tungsten is such a defined temperature. Yeah. And if you dim it, you get a certain kind of quality light, and you add a gel. It's a very defined way of working. I've used a lot of LEDs for big softlit sets and effects, but I think the biggest problem I've had is the budget. Yeah. That it ends up being so much more expensive. When we were doing Blade Runner, I know you did June after us, right, in Budapest. But when we were doing Blade Runner, the idea of getting a huge number of LEDs to light some of those sets was not tenable,
It's an unfortunate reality that economics plays a big part of our decisions I mean, of course it has to, but it's unfortunate that, and I've kind of pushed back against that idea, and that I know that rental companies have a stock of certain lights that they're going to rent out cheaper, right? So the reality is, if you've got a big set, that's an economic thing. I've pushed back against that as much as I can. I mean, you're right about tungsten, because tungsten's reliable. Like, you can put a tungsten from any part of the world up, and you know what color it is. Like, an LED is not reliable. So if someone's saying, "Hey," Roger's saying, "Okay, hey, I want Arri sky panels up in my roof." I go, "Hey, I haven't got Arri sky panels, but we've got these fantastic new Russian, Hungarian, whatever they are." I won't discount countries of origin, of course, because my favorite ones are from Estonia. I will say that. But the point is, you don't know what it does to skin. You don't know what happens when you dim it. You don't know if it flickers. So unfortunately, we're in this sort of cowboy world where the most dependable lights that exist in quantity are one defined quality, which is a sky panel. The sky panel exists in thousands of units, and they only do a certain job. But a rental company is always going to want to rent out the tungsten that they've got sitting on the shelf, because that's free money for them, as opposed to having to invest in new technology. So I did a film. I'm not sure how much I should name these movies, because it names the studios and I don't want anyone. But I did a film in Los Angeles, and the studio that was very environmentally conscious, as in they had, don't throw your plastic cups out, and recycle, and here's the recycling bin. We put a bid in for this particular set of LEDs versus tungsten skylights, and the budget came in massively about LEDs versus the tungsten, and we worked out what the carbon footprint and the environmental cost of that was, and went to them and said, "Guys, I hate to be a bit of a douche, but you're talking about saving plastic cups, which you should be, but you're about to spew thousands upon thousands upon thousands of tons of carbon into the air just for me to light this set." Now, again, I want without becoming an environmentalist, I want that choice. You want that choice, not to spew carbon, because again, you can offset that, and there's ways to do that. But the point is that they were giving me one choice, no choices. So it was one choice. And we said, listen, maybe we mix it. Maybe we can reduce our carbon footprint by using tungsten there and doing that here. It was a kind of a game that I wanted to play to get my chosen sources on the job. But the thing is that I think it's all about balance, because right now, when there's no choice, you have no choice. It's good, though, if that's your chosen source, which I think is important to protect. As DPs, it's important for us to protect what it is we want to use. So I told you that set that I just shot with Dino's, every day I was on set going, "Oh my God, this is amazing. This is beautiful. So it's important that the next time I do that set, I want that option to be able to use those lights, but I also want the option to be able to, say, use more expensive lights in a different environment.
Tell us about what you set up on Mandalorian.
Mandalorian is the most stressed I've ever been in my entire life. I think probably I was more stressed when I was doing my first music video with a band, a big band in Melbourne that I was having to meet, and I was shaking as I'm metering there with the key light in their face. But I was very stressed because normally on a set, as you guys know, there's normally a plan B. Like, you have an opportunity. Right. If you walk into a set and it's snowing outside, or there's an eclipse, or I don't know, something, there's a plan B. You have a solve. On Mandalorian, we were using non-animated but three-dimensional backgrounds on an LED wall, and that if that wall didn't work because someone had forgotten to plug it in, or there'd been someone tripped over the cable, or a rat had eaten something, there's 1,000 permutations of why it didn't work, that you suddenly didn't have it in the shoot, because all of your light was derived from the LED volume. The backstory of it's quite, I'll make it short, but I did Rogue One, and we pitched the idea of a LED volume to do all the spaceship work. And currently Lucasfilm at the same time were talking about trying to do a live action TV show on a volume of light. They didn't know what that was, and suddenly the two ideas gelled. So we did some tests back in 2005, and we realized that we could actually do some drama on an LED volume under certain lighting circumstances. So
what does that mean, an LED volume?
Well, we used the term volume because effectively what it was a circle of LEDs with a roof. So the circle was 75 foot wide and the roof was 20 foot high. And the way I saw it, it was like walking out into nature. Let's say you walk out into the desert and sunset, you're in a volume of light, effectively, right? You've got light bouncing off the mountains. You've got light coming primarily from where the sun's set. You've got darkness coming from where it hasn't set. You're in a volume of light. It happens that the volume is thousands of miles and stuff. So we were able to kind of translate that idea to this round volume of LEDs that created that lighting scenario. So we were able to do scenarios that you might ordinarily not be able to do, like a sunset scene or a twilight scene, or so scenes like that the light is actually critical. And we know we've all done those scenes over 3 dusks and they've been great. But we could do those for 12 hours because that light exists the whole time.
Wow.
Now, you'd always want to do it for real if you can. But what we're talking about is high volume filming, and that TV generally would never do a dusk scene or a twilight scene because there's no scheduled time to do that. So we were able to take some scenarios and take the emotional reaction that you get from staging something at dusk or at twilight and imbue that into a guy with a tin helmet. Like, it's to try and kind of make up for the fact that we weren't seeing human faces. I felt that we needed to really push the lighting a little bit more emotional. So, the power of it is that the background's interactive in the sense that you move the camera and you have parallax. And to me, that was the biggest thing. It's not just a lighting tool, although it is a very powerful lighting tool. It is also a very powerful framing tool where you can move the camera and the system knows what lens you're on because it's been programmed. So the sensors know where the lens is in the space because there are sensors everywhere. And wherever you move, the parallax moves with it. And the first day that I got onto the test set that we did 2 scenarios that blew my mind. My mind doesn't blow easily. A little bit kind of like, yep, okay, good. That'll be useful. Great, move on. But my mind blew twice. And one was, I was following behind the Mandalorian. I was walking behind him towards the screen. My eyepiece was looking here. My left eye was closed. When I say here, through the eyepiece, and my left eye was closed. And I'm watching him walking into the abyss, into infinity. I open my left eye, and I realize that I'm walking towards a screen. So my left eye and my right eye were telling me 2 different things.
Wow.
And I almost fainted. I've never fainted before, but I know what it feels like to almost faint. I started feeling dizzy, and I started going, whoa, okay, hold it together. Because my right eye was being totally fooled. And that was a mind blower. And the other one was where I got camera on the shoulder and I was inside an office in a warehouse and I'm looking outside the windows, even though the windows are virtual. And I'm following a guy around and I'm framing him. I'm moving a little bit to the left so he's suddenly not in front of the window. He's a little bit just off the window, or I'm moving up a bit so that the lines work out. So as a DP, the power of it is that you're not allowing somebody in post later on to make decisions for your framing, because if you shoot against blue screen, but you're doing the framing yourself. And the lighting itself all marries together because it's all true. It's the most, Roger, you talked about your lighting, like you try and make it feel real, there can't be unnatural points of light sources coming from everywhere. Like, it's got to feel real or a rendition of real. You can't get any more real than shooting on a volume because the lighting is what it is. And if you design the loads properly, the loads are what goes in the background, you know that you've got great shots looking this way, and then you turn the load around, you're looking that way. It's a bit of an exciting jump forward in my mind because it gives the DP and the director more power on set.
But I've only seen little bits of snippets, but what's the interface then between the actor and basically an LED screen background? Where does the live action, as it were, blend into the background?
Well, you need to find a seam. Like there has to be a seam. So if you're in the desert, then you've got sand on the ground. This is the basic version, and we got better as the season went on. But you've got sand on the ground, and then it falls off because it's the end of the stage. And then there's a gap, and then there's an image on the screen. So if your actor has to then go suddenly do a 2-mile run in one shot, well, you can't do that because he's going to hit the screen. But he can turn around and start to run, and then you can cut to a profile shot of him running across the volume, and then you can cut to a behind the shoulder. Like there are ways to tell a story in a small volume. Now, not to say it's not limiting. I mean, here's the thing: like if you have an opportunity to do your wides in the real environment, and then come in and do your close-ups on the volume that's controlled, there's a huge bonus for that. So
I was watching on Dangerous Ground the other night. It was doing exactly the same thing. You remember the film noir? It was some sort of budgetary thing. They could shoot exteriors up in the snows of the Rockies or something, but then they had to do close-ups in the studios against back projection, or I guess it was back projection in those days. So really that's kind of what you're doing, but in a much more sophisticated way.
Exactly. And I feel like it's a lot more believable, not to disrespect the stuff that was happening then, but it's just purely technology. And I feel like there's a movie that's going to occur at some point that does that. They shoot in the old-fashioned way. They go out to the Rockies and they shoot the dusk stuff, and they do one shot a day. Maybe it's the wide and a medium close-up, and they move on to the next scenario, and then they come back to the stage and they do 10 pages of exposition on the volume, and the Mandalorian, Mandalorian's a fun series. It's a fun series for Star Wars fans, I feel, and it was a hard character to find emotion with because he's got a chrome helmet, but with the casting of Pedro and the script, and hopefully with some of our camera moves, we kind of helped imbue that character with that kind of that old gunslinger kind of John Wayne style character.
Right.
So in post, do you keep the backgrounds in? You're not replacing them?
Well, the ideal scenario is you do not replace the backgrounds. That's the ideal scenario. And that saves so much money and everyone's really happy about that. The reality is, I think the early stages of this, backgrounds were refined. Even if they are refined, it's a very simple process because you're just doing a garbage mat around your character, especially if he doesn't have frizzy hair. A garbage mat around.
If he has a helmet, great.
Exactly right. So I feel that there was a few backgrounds replaced that didn't quite live up. Now, unfortunately, I didn't follow that through because I was on another show. But the quality of work that finished as a result of it, there were a lot of times I was really happy with the work. Yeah, there were times where it kind of blew your eyes a bit. It's great, but there are other times I was like, this works really well. This is beautiful, and it's emotional, and it's got all of the. I want to do a drama. I want to do a beautiful human to human drama in that world.
I got two questions really. First, okay, so you don't use any additional light on the characters on the what I would say was the set, the character and the immediate set, right? You're using the screen to light the foreground.
I rarely used lights additional because the guy was chrome, so that was a problem. So you'd feel it,
right?
But I kind of feel like it works the same way as a normal set. Like if you're out in the desert at dusk,
right?
Would you give him Would you give him or her any additional light? Maybe a bit of eye light, maybe a bit of bounce. Absolutely.
But my point is that really that the LED screen is not an infinite distance away, so your light source is actually closer. So the fall off from the LED screen is different than it would be if the sunset were, how many million miles away the sun is,
Yep. You're absolutely right. In theory, if that whole that law, whatever that physics law is, that the
inverse square law,
twice the distance and half the stop.
Yeah.
that was one of the debates we all had really early on, and there were so many voices that had a different opinion about the way this would work. And this is why I was so stressed by the time there was a lot of money riding on these tests to see if they were, because you're right, the theory of, yes, the sun's, the sky over there is 100 miles away. So therefore the light soft coming from that sky is not going to drop off the same way as if the light that's there is 30 feet away. But the funny thing is that even though you might have a little difference in T-stop if you've got your meter and got very scientific with it, the feel was the same. Like, because the bounce coming from that side made up for the fall off here, and again, provided you exposed properly. There were times where I shot some tests at dusk or night or day for night and stuff. I was like, wow, yeah, this is really believable. Basically I wouldn't have asked the question if I was on a volume or not. So even though you're right, there is a physical difference, and that the ceiling is only 20 feet high and not, 50 miles in the air, it still has the same quality. If corralled correctly, I feel like you could make it look bad if you assume it's going to look good, and I feel like it could be bad. It could be bad if not done correctly.
The other question I wanted to ask then, obviously, is how do the actors feel being in, okay, it's probably better than acting against blue screen, but how does that work? Do the actors really feel in that environment? Is that, how do you feel that works?
Well, Werner Herzog walked on set the first day, and I love, and I'd met him crazily, like in the highlands of Iceland when we were shooting Rogue One, and they were staying at the same hotel that houses 7 people, ridiculously small little hotel. And he walked on the set and he was kind of excited by the technology. And there was a little bit, unfortunately, one thing we missed on the very, very first round was there's a little bit of a acoustic thing going on where sound bounces off the roof and off the walls, and it comes back at you. So we solved that with baffles and the whole thing. But it was, I believe, at the very beginning a little bit tricky to get used to, where if you're talking, it's to try and get used to the sounds coming back at you. It's not a dead space,
Right.
So I believe, though, I can tell you this, all the directors that worked on it want to use it again. So, and there's some great directors in that series. And when I first explained to them the concept and showed them the tests, they were all a little like, I'm not sure I want this restrict. This is not good. This is like, how are you going to restrict me into a space that's this big by this big? And I understood that. And they said those things like, what happens if we want them to turn around and run for 20 miles in one shot? It's like, you can't. You can't. But it's like you might better not spin the camera around when you're on a film, because there's the unit base there. So whereas this, you can spin the whole world around and there's no unit base. You're not moving anything. So there are advantages in this and disadvantages in it. And if you play to the advantages, then you get,
Right.
But every director that worked on the system want to work on the system again. And I know there are a few directors that are going forward with projects that are using the system.
Right.
So it is being used on other projects.
It will be being used, yeah.
I would think it would be more popular now than ever.
Well, it's funny. I'm fielding calls every second day because people want to set up a volume. But it's the type of thing. It's like, and this is interesting for a DP because it changes our job somewhat, because we don't just go on location scout. Like you talked about location scouting, about how even if it's the wrong location, it's a great opportunity to discuss what the scene is. Well, imagine there's no location. Imagine it's all in the VR goggles. And
Oh dear.
And imagine it's not even in the VR goggles, but it's not even lit and textured. Imagine it's just wireframes. I mean, you guys have done a bit of that with your animation, and it's to try and scout a location that's wireframe and talk about what the coverage is. It's a huge challenge and a great challenge, but it takes a lot of getting used to.
Yeah. it's blank slate, isn't it? It's not like you're reacting to something. You're actually, you and the director and the production designer, you're actually creating something from scratch. I mean, much, I suppose, in the same way as you were working on a stage set with no locations and no references. Yeah.
But at least with a stage set, it's very similar, actually. You're right. I mean, it's a very similar example where you don't have anything to work on, but as the frame goes in, you stand there with a viewfinder and talk about coverage. And then as the walls go in and before it's lit, you go in there and you might go in there 3 or 4 times. It's exactly the same as that, actually, Roger. It's a good point. It's exactly the same because you've got concepts, you've got ideas, but you need to go back to that space 4 or 5 times before you're ready to shoot, because you need to make sure that they're not building a wall in a place that's going to be wrong. So it's the same world.
Yeah, I mean, the same restrictions in a way, isn't it? You can't, if you're shooting a film totally on stage with sets, you still can't have a guy run 100 yards.
It's true. Yeah, it's true.
You can't track behind them. There's no way of doing that. So,
exactly.
in a way, there's a few more technical restrictions, but then, as you say, there's a huge amount of freedom by being able to shoot an exterior twilight scene and not having, like we did on No Country for Old Men, have to shoot it for like 7 or 8 days, morning and evening. Yeah, it's a huge freedom. Yeah, I mean, anything you do in a film really is a trade-off, isn't it? And it's a compromise in some way. You're never going to get the perfect situation. So I think you have to judge the kind of project and how you're going to work with it to get the best result.
My prediction that is in 10 years is that, because right now that The Mandalorian was all about the volume, and I think that's a little, it's a technique-based. I mean, not the film, but the fact that it has to be around the volume. Yeah. My prediction is in 10 years that we're all going to be doing films and that we're going to go, all right, well, we're going to New Mexico to shoot the bulk of No Country for Old Men. And then there's going to be a scene where that happens. Maybe it's not the running scene because that's a bad example of him having to get away from a lot of people. But you might have 2 people sitting at a roadside diner. There's a scene that we did on, I think, chapter 2 of Mandalorian or whatever, but he's got a little workstation and it's a fluorescent lit workstation. So the primary light's practical light on set, and then it falls off to darkness, and then you can see the mountains in the background. Like, there's no reason, no one can tell me that you could not do a serious drama in that lighting environment with 2 A-grade actors. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
No one could tell me that. Yet we as DPs go, well, it says script, last light, fluoro lit. We'd have to find ways to do the coverage into things that don't see the hillside to be able to get the shot, in schedule. Right. This, every angle you looked was perfect. So, it's not, also the practicalities of filming. There was one set we did with Werner where we finished 3/4 of the day a quarter of the day earlier than we were scheduled. We moved some of the chess pieces and created a rooftop and changed the backgrounds and had Mandalorian on a rooftop with a sight overlooking the building. Now, we kind of had a plan for that, but it was a made-up plan, and we did it, and we got ahead in the day because it was an incredibly efficient way of working. So, yeah, I'm a strong advocate of it. I mean, listen, again, I love shooting for real. I mean, with Denis, we went to Abu Dhabi and shot mornings and nights. Like, there's nothing better than that. So, that's a way to do it, and it was beautiful. But it's just another tool in the toolbox that I feel is better than blue screen.
I'm sure the way you suggest, okay, you shoot certain amount on location, then come back to the studio. Then it's a balance, though, isn't it, between shooting those plates, as it were, to put on the LiDAR background and the cost effectiveness of staying on location and renting a studio space and setting that whole deal up. So there's, like it is on any film, you're balancing out different elements and different approaches. Tell me, I'm really interested. You've done everything from like huge scale films like Dune and Batman, Star Wars, and then you've done Lion and The Last Ride, which is one of my favorites, actually. I how you shot that, I don't know, because that's got a huge amount of dawn, dusk, and really, really beautiful light. Which is your favorite, and how do you judge when you
High
say
or
yes
low?
to a movie? Yeah.
Well, I was actually going to ask you the same question, which I will. So I'll ask you that in a second, because it's all about, for me, it's all about the fire in the belly, that drive. Because if it's a challenge, okay, we love great stories, right? We love great stories. We love great actors. We love great performance as viewers. And if we read something that interests us, now maybe the story of something is not the be all and end all, but maybe it's an interesting story that we can get our teeth into. But maybe technologically we can also help drive things forward, because trying new things is kind of the fun part. I mean, again, Roger, the question I want to ask you, because you guys do such variety, but like after Bright Star, I got every offer of every period movie under the sun. And
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
it was very nice. I was like very humbled by that. But the last thing that I wanted to do was a period drama. So,
Yeah.
but when Matt, who had seen Bright Star, Matt Reeves, asked me to do a vampire movie, that vampire film, which I loved the script of, but his pitch to me wasn't, I love the way you lit Bright Star. He went, I love the way that you covered your characters, those two people in love.
Right.
And I was like, that to me is the thing. So it's not being sweet talked. Obviously, I can see through kind of sweet talking and, but it's about going or capturing. If a director or somebody sees something from my work that can enable that production to be better than what it currently is, then I find it interesting. And if it gives me something, obviously selfishly, it's got to give me something. As in, it's got to give me the ability to learn. It's got to give me the ability to get back with my crew, who are family, like to tell a story that I've really wanted to tell for a long time. And frankly, the whole big film of it all, I mean, you guys like it's, unfortunately, if you're taking big films because it's a big movie, it's probably the wrong movie to take, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I tend to shy away from them, really.
Yeah. But that's the thing.
When I first talked to Sam Mendes about Skyfall, I was going like, I don't know, a big movie, a Bond movie. But then we were talking the other day, we went for a walk down on the beach here in Santa Monica, and he said, we're just going to do it like we did Jarhead. We'll do single camera. Sometimes we'll have to do multiple cameras, but don't think of it as a big movie, It's just a movie, it's a story. And that sold me more than anything, that feeling that you're approaching the script. Doesn't matter the scale of the budget, whatever it is, it's really about the script and the characters and emotional response to that.
But my question is like, to that point, I mean, you kind of half answered it though, because you guys together have done almost every possible thing. Like if you're let's be real. I mean, yes, there are scripts you haven't done and stuff, but every single genre, like, I mean, maybe there are a couple, like,
we haven't done a musical.
Right, there you go.
Never will. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't say that.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I have this secret little desire to
really
have people break out into song about, I don't know, maybe I don't. But that, okay. So you haven't done a musical, but you guys have done everything else. Like what? Okay, I'm a producer. What can I send you?
Actually, I did do a musical. I did a musical called Waterloo with Ray Davis when I was first starting. Remember Waterloo? Ray Davis? Well, it was a little film that was about commuters going to Waterloo Station in London.
I didn't see it.
When the trains came into the platform, everybody would get off and start singing and dancing on the platform.
Can't say I've ever seen it.
Good. Well, it was a musical.
Anyway,
I love it.
You were
musical.
saying.
Well, so no, if I'm a director or a producer, and I really want you guys to be involved in my project, like what is it that piques your interest? I mean,
script.
Yeah.
Script. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, what you said before. I mean, obviously, if you work with a director before, it's a very different thing. But and also, it's where you go. It is working with your crew again. It's like family, and I love that whole side of it. But in the end, it's got to be the script. I mean, any film you do, it's quite an investment of time and yeah, if you care about it, it's also a lot of stress.
Well, I think it's script, and then you meet with the director and see if the director's going in the same route that you're thinking, and if the personalities match.
Yeah.
And then...
Because it is, isn't it? Like, it's a chunk of time you'll never get back, like, in your life. Yeah. So if you're standing on set lamenting the fact that, why have I done this? Because it's like, why? Because it's near my house in Santa Monica or near my house in Devon. Like, would I, as opposed to going, no, I'm going to take a bullet for this script. I'm going to take a bullet for this director.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So you're married with a family. That must be tough too. And so when you choose a script that's far away, that's a big decision, right? For your family as well as you.
It is. It is. It's something I very much have to, of course, my wife's very successful in her own right. So, we don't move based on my movements. But she realizes that the film industry is something that can take me places to do projects that feed me creatively, Mm-hmm. I've done some things that have not fed me emotionally, creatively and emotionally, for various reasons. For whatever reasons, I won't go into them. But I've done projects and things for various reasons, and sometimes in life you do have to do those things. Well, especially if you've got a mortgage, or you're building a house, or you've got a family, or whatever it is. Like, sometimes you have to make decisions for that reason. But for the most part, I've been fortunate to have the support of my wife and family to go and do things that I love, regardless of the budget, regardless of how much money it makes, regardless of, So they are factors. They are factors in taking a job. And so the discussion isn't just with my wife like, hey, it's a great script, I really want to do it. It's more like, okay, so here's the deal. It looks like it's going from June to December. I'll be a flight that's got 2 stops that you have to stop to get the kids there. Like, they're factors. Can you fly directly there? Who can we get to fly? It's a very long and boring conversation, but it's a necessary one. And trying to find the balance is hard. Although I will say the payoffs are pretty amazing, because, like, doing Rogue One, I was a Star Wars fan as a kid, which meant that when I met on Star Wars, I was convinced I wasn't going to do it because I didn't want to destroy my childhood memories. but then after 15 minutes, I was like, I'm definitely doing this project. But my children had the opportunity to be there as well, and they weren't Star Wars fans then. Now they are the biggest Star Wars fans in the world, to the point where it's annoying. But to have that and to be able to sort of give that to the kids as like, well, you were there. Remember that scene? And they're like, yeah, that's quite cool and quite unique. So it's about balance, James. It doesn't get any easier, and I have lots of conversations with fellow DPs with kids the same age about how to do it. On 0 Dark 30, my firstborn was 3 months old, and I left him for 6 months. I mean, listen, it's not going to war, and I would never equate it with that. But I know I have a semblance of an idea of what people that go to war with young children feel like, because they can't see them. I mean, of course, we were not under any danger, but it's leaving a family at that point is tough. So it's a balance.
And it must be hard when you're coming back from a really tough shoot that's taken everything out of you, to come back to the family when you kind of need to recover for a little bit. I mean, isn't that hard, where, oh, hi, how are you? And it's like, oh, too much stimulus.
Yeah, well, 100%. And it's again, I have many conversations, as does my wife, with other wives about how you deal with it. Like, do you come home and stay in your room for 4 days, 5 days?
Self-isolate.
Self-isolate. Do you go and stay in a hotel in Palm Springs for a week by yourself? Like, there's no answer. There's no clean answer to that.
It's a weird thing, isn't it? I mean, we work together, so we're really lucky that family is our work. But I do find, just a few hours after the last shot, I find it really hard to go to the wrap party, for instance.
Yeah.
I find, a few days after a film's finished, I feel a bit lost. If you've spent so much of your time and effort on this one thing, and then suddenly it all stops.
It's a few weeks, not a few days.
A few weeks.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go there, but
let's be real.
It's such an intense emotional experience making a movie, because you're in each other's pockets for such a long time. You've experienced the highs and the lows, and the grumpy days and the happy days, and the wrap party is always a hard one, because it's on one hand incredibly sad, because you're not going to see these people again for a while. Another thing, incredibly happy that you've achieved a goal together. It's an emotional roller coaster, and I agree. I have the same issue, and that's why, like, in Mary, I didn't go to the rep party. I was like, I can't just deal with this. But on Dune, oh, man, one of the crazy parts of Dune is we went from Hungary to Abu Dhabi to, we reduced the crew down each time. Yeah. We went from a really big crew to a medium crew to a small crew to a 3-man crew, person crew, and we had rep parties every single time. And at some point, I couldn't emotionally handle it. We're at a rap party in Abu Dhabi, about to go to another location, and we're having a rap party. And I was like, let's get these rap parties wrapped. Like, these are...
Yeah.
Because it's like suddenly...
We had that bit on Skyfall, didn't we?
Yeah. Saying goodbye all the time.
Yeah, we're not going to see such and such actor again. It's like, oh, I'm not going to see such and such crew because they get off the plane. Like, it's like, oh, man. No, emotionally, it's something that's not really kind of talked about much. I mean, it's not, but it's very much a thing. And particularly if you've got a family that have been in a routine, they go to school, they do this, like, you come home like this kind of whirlwind, especially as a DP, where you control things on a set. Like, you're responsible for that pop-up not being there, move that or this being a certain way, or monitors being shielded like that. Like, your kind of job is to run things, and suddenly you come home to a place that you can't run. It's
it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And no one's getting your coffee all the time.
No, and no one pays you an ounce of respect. So can you move an inch to your left? No.
No, it's so true. Can you tell us have you got a favorite experience, of not a favorite film necessarily, but a favorite experience or a challenge that stands out in your mind?
No, that's a good question. I haven't, not one particular. I could name 100 right now, and often those are experiences that you've had recently. I mean, working on Dune with Denis was incredible. I mean, you guys have experienced.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's such a blessing, and the crew that they put together, and I brought my crew to it, and like, it was such a, that's what I meant. Like, when we had 3 or 4 rep parties, it was horrifyingly sad, because we're like, this is gonna, we're gonna finish. No, there's not, but I'll tell you what, the things that come to mind for me, as opposed to one incredibly good experience, as opposed to a series of great experiences, are mistakes, things where I've had, I've effed up, or I've planned something that didn't work and I couldn't. Like, there's a couple of those in my life, and I'm like, oh man, that's really embarrassing. That maybe for 4 or 5 years after it happened, I wouldn't tell a soul, but now I'm kind of like, well, there are things that like that stand out. So yeah. I would.
It's also the way you learn, though.
That's right. I mean, what's the worst mistake that you guys have made? Like, to reverse that positive question into a negative question.
Oh, the worst thing that is saying yes to a film that I knew I shouldn't have done. I knew I shouldn't have been on that film, but I was persuaded maybe by an agent or something like that, and 3 weeks, 5 weeks later, I'm quitting or being fired. I think not not trusting my gut, frankly.
Yeah. Following your gut instinct.
Yeah, taking a decision based on an analysis rather than an emotional reaction to the offer of a job.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think I agree with you. It's like it's a rounded experience of life, really, isn't it? I've got so many wonderful experiences, some hard ones as well, but I mean, you take them all together, don't you?
I think it's also really interesting because you go through, and because I started as a script supervisor, I have too much of a memory, because you go through a film and you really suffer. You suffer a lot. And then it's amazing how quickly, especially with you, Roger, it's just all good memories.
Oh, you have to, don't you? A lot of it.
I wish I could forget sometimes. But
well, the thing I kind of like, what's the right word? I can't think of the right word. You know, after a few years, you've been on a film, you think, oh, maybe it wasn't quite right or whatever. And you watch it maybe 3 or 4 years later or 4 or 5 years later and you go, my God, that's not bad.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a few that I've seen.
That happens a lot.
I always thought that I'd screwed that up, but actually, that's not bad. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I'd love you to like name names at this point, but I know you can't. So like, I'd love you to be able to
pretty
say.
much every film.
Are you ever happy with what you've done? I mean, ever really happy at the end of a shoot?
Because you've compromised along the way.
Yeah, it's funny when you ask the question about like some of the most happy I've been about films are actually not necessarily the films that have seen the most amount of traction. You know, like for me, Mary Magdalene is to me, that's the most beautiful film I've shot, with performances and script and the actors and the ensemble, but no one's seen that. I mean, maybe it's not the best film I've shot, but I just
well, there is that. It's a bit of a letdown, isn't it, when you've spent so much time on something and then either it's buried or the audience doesn't relate to it. I mean, I feel that way about Kundun. It was one of the best experiences of our life, of my life. You know, from a lot of different reasons, not just the challenge of the filmmaking, but the people involved, the crew.
Tibetans,
the Tibetans, obviously. And that whole situation was just a really wonderful experience. And then for the film to basically been buried, frankly, was really disheartening.
It's a shame. It's a lot of people's effort, isn't it? And sometimes it's the work of one person, producer, perhaps. Yeah. Or a studio that decides that it doesn't fit their slate, it becomes a commodity. Yeah. You know, and when that film that people's blood, sweat, and tears are in becomes a commodity, then you know that there's going to be disappointment. That is, I agree, that is one of the most disheartening things, where you work your butt off. And listen, sometimes things just don't work as well. Like that's sometimes things aren't as good as each other, and sometimes there's, lightning in a bottle where it does work. But I know that from the perspective of cinematography, where you feel like everything you did lined up perfectly. Maybe that's part of the reason why it doesn't work when it does work, or when things are too good. I mean, I shouldn't. I'm not necessarily saying about Mary Magdalene, but there were some sequences in that were, for me, so beautiful and so appropriate, and I don't know. Maybe it was. I don't know. Maybe it didn't have that. I don't.
Do you find? That's interesting. And do you find you're sometimes you're censoring yourself? Do you find when you're shooting, you kind of go, "Oh, wait a minute, Greig, that's too pretty. I'm being seduced by something because it's beautiful, but it's not necessarily right." You know what I mean? I kind of find that a bit,
Well, I think
I find. I mean, frankly, I find quite a lot of cinematography now seduced that way either seduced by a wonderful camera move or some very kind of pretty lighting, but it's not, doesn't really complement the story or drive the story forward somehow.
One of the things that I love about filmmaking as opposed to photography is photography takes itself very seriously. And I apologize to any photographers listening, because I don't want to sound offensive but photography takes itself very seriously. Like a photograph goes up on the wall and it becomes like the Mona Lisa. It becomes a thing that you stand and you study and you look at the light, and I do it all the time too. So I'm not saying it shouldn't. But the great thing about, and the reason why I think cinematography appealed to me, was that, I could spend 4 days lighting a scene or 4 days lighting a shot. If I'm that internal, and I come back each day and I make a small change, and that would be. Whereas, on a film set where we have to do our wide in 45 minutes, and then our close-ups have to take 15 minutes each. So we're working on a pure subconscious level where we do it. Does it feel right? Does it feel right? Does it feel right? No. Yes, good. Let's shoot. Like you're working on a heightened level of subconscious skill, I guess, and instinct. And when if you surround yourself with images and prep about beautiful images, then you'll probably end up with a film that's too beautiful. But also, I agree, but having also a director that you can then play against as well visually is able to help. I mean, Garth, who's one of my best friends on Mary, he has got a very finely tuned, as does Glendon for that matter, a very finely tuned beauty radar, where they know that they look at your frame and they're like, yeah, it's too pretty. So you might go, yeah, it is, you're right. Or they might offer up an idea and you go, yeah, but that's a silhouette. It's a beautiful shot. But didn't we just do a silhouette a scene ago? And doesn't it subtract from the power of that silhouette or whatever it was? But so having people that can help be your guide effectively. So because, if you're working 12 hours a day, there's no way for 12 hours a day you can be perfectly tuned in to your instincts. Like, it might be just before lunch, you might be hungry, it might just be after lunch, you might have had a pasta dish. You might not be tuned consciously into your feelings. So to have people that can, help out with that is really important.
What do you want most from a director? What do you what does a director give you? What do you hope for most from a director?
I mean, I'm a strong believer in the fact that we as a film crew need to be led into battle, and you need somebody who is kind to people. I think that's very important to have skill as a understanding direction, but also somebody that understands human condition, that understands the difference between performances, so that you're not just taking the best performance that an actor thinks they're giving you, but actually try and delve deeper into what that character or that actor can give. I love watching directors work where I'm like, oh man, that's an amazing performance. And then they go one more time or twice more, and you get something that's just like beyond anything that you ever would have imagined is possible. And I love watching that. A director needs to be, above all, fair and kind to the crew. I think that do
you think a director has to know about a camera, about lighting or lenses and shot setup?
Not necessarily. I don't think they need to, but they need to be in tune with their instincts. So they don't need to know what lens you're using because you're using a large format. So therefore, is it a 35 or a 32? Like, they don't need to know technically what the difference between a 32 and a 50 is emotionally. But as long as they react to that, and as long as they react in a repeatable way, that's the thing, because you then learn. Like, there have been times where, like, you put a lens on that yesterday was right for that particular scenario, and now it's not, and trying to understand why it's not, and not just because it's the whim of a crazy leader that wants to, show their skill, whatever. But yeah, I do think I don't necessarily think they need to have that, because, I have that, I hope, and so therefore I can give that to them. But as long as I give that to them and they can give me an honest feedback emotionally based on how they feel, then that's all I need.
Right. Have you ever worked with a director that's specified lenses and where the camera is going to go? Or lighting?
No. But I'm not against that idea. I mean, I know there are some directors. I know there are some directors out there that do that, and I hear stories of some directors who are really they. I mean, to micromanage is a term which is generally used as negative, but I'm not using it as negative. They micromanage exactly what the lighting's doing and where the camera is. I'm not against that idea at all. Again, provided they're doing it in a kind way,
Yeah.
Ultimately, I feel like I'm a tool for the director if they if that's what they want to do, if I am just a glorified kind of seat filler behind the monitors, and I'm still getting something out of it, like I'm still, able to contribute, then I have no problem with that.
Right.
But it has to give me something. How do you feel about that? Like, because have you worked with a director that's kind of said, Roger, 32 mil here, and it's a push in?
No, I never have, and I've heard tales about directors that work like that, but I've never experienced. I mean, the Coen brothers are very knowledgeable about lenses and camera movement, obviously, but they're not dictatorial about it at all. In fact, you just like working with anybody else. You look at the blocking with the actors and think, oh, well, we'll do this coverage, and you do it, and they leave the cinematographer to set the shot like anybody else, really. Yeah.
I would think also having the challenge of taking the director's vision and then putting it up there would be much more fun than being told how to do it.
Yeah, I would. But I was interested to reply to the question or the conversation, because I agree the same thing. I think the only thing a director has to bring is exactly what you said, is their attitude and their passion for the project and their ability to intuitively sense when they've got a performance and when they've got the best of something.
Yeah.
And also have a little bit of trust with the people that they're working with.
Absolutely. Totally. And that is a big thing, because ultimately, if you want to work with the best people, you need to give them a reason to be there. And I'm not talking about cinematographers necessarily. I'm talking, focus pullers. I'm talking, your amazing
costumes.
crew, like everybody. Yeah. They've got to have a reason to be there, because they could choose to go and work for someone else and feel like they're enjoying work each day. So if there's a set that's kind of hasn't got that vibe, I do love going from working with people like, say, I'm using this example, like Catherine Bigelow, who loved 4 cameras handheld, shooting every aspect of the scene, to other directors like Matt Reeves or Garth Davis, who's 1 camera, maybe 2, that's got or Jane Campion's a perfect example. Jane Campion can't and won't do 2 cameras, and I respect her highly for that. I remember I pulled out a second camera one day and recommended we shoot it at an angle because it was a dusk scene, and she was a little unhappy with me because I managed to talk her into it, but I feel like she felt a little strong-armed by that, and I apologized and said, you know what, I'm sorry, I was trying to do what I thought was right, and I understand that you didn't feel comfortable with it. It will never happen again. So she's totally singular. So to have those extremes and mold ourselves as a DP, as a cinematographer, into that world, because as much as creating images, it's also, again, it's a backstop for the director, isn't it? Like to make sure they get in the editing room what they need to cut their film.
That must change the way you work, right? Because you operate a lot, don't you? Lion, for instance, you operated, right?
Yeah, I try and operate on everything. It's such a sense of helplessness or hopelessness when I don't have the ability to put my hands on the wheels. But in Zero Dark was different because I was operating a camera, but trying to watch a B and a C and a D camera is impossible. So there were times I traded out and somebody else operated. But for scenes that required the finesse of the camera being in a particular place, like an emotional scene that requires effectively 1 camera, but maybe the second camera is getting inserts, that was always going to be me, because to try and explain that, as you well know, like, it's not just about doing a close-up front 3/4. It's about saying, well, there's a light right there, and if you get that out of shot, it's going to be more powerful. But you can't communicate that in real time to an operator, even the best operators. So in that sense, handheld or framing, I mean, you said yourself on a podcast, like if you're doing a one-er and you're choosing the frame, if the camera lands in a different spot, the actor's in a different spot, you have to make the choice. Is it central? Is it just off central? Is it, short-sighted, long-sighted? Like, And at least then when you make the choice, it's correct. But if somebody else makes it, you could go, should have been central. And so, yeah, I feel like it's and you've said it often, and I 100% agree. It's hand in glove, operating and lighting. They're the same. They're the same job. I mean, they're two aspects of the same job, and how you can separate them out, I don't understand. Batman, I will say this: Batman right now, I do have an operator on, fantastic operator, but the Batman's a lot more kind of controlled in terms of the movement. It's definitely got movement, but it's more kind of it's more controlled movement. So that operator helps because the lighting payload on Batman is very heavy because it's all very noir, it's dark. It's a hard one to light, actually. I will say that. Hard.
What are you shooting on, actually? You're shooting film or digital?
Digital, LF, Lexa LF.
Right. Oh, yes, of course you are,
great.
the LF, yeah.
Yeah, with some new interesting anamorphics that Ari have helped us with.
Oh, wow.
How do you think technology's changed your job over the years?
It's gotten... I think effectively, some of the things have gotten easier. Like making sure you've got an exposure, going home, sleeping well, knowing that you've got an exposure, not waking up to a phone call from a Los Angeles-based number at 4 a.m. going, hey, you're laughing, Roger, because I know you've experienced it. Like going, I know, I hope that's not the lab. Oh, hi, Greg. Oh, man. Okay.
Oh, God.
Give me the good news and the bad news. So it helps with that, and it helps with any of the analog problems that we've experienced. An actor not hitting their mark, unfortunately, being the circle take might be a little bit out of focus, or they might be exposed. Whatever it is, like it gets rid of those, which I think were a hindrance. But I remember I was listening to Bev talk about film and printer lights. You talking about printer lights. I hadn't shot enough film to be as fully au fait with printer lights as you were, but so I was relying a little bit on printer lights a bit, but also unfortunately having to watch every week on the Saturday. But I remember this one scene on Bright Star. I was getting a VHS copy of the dailies back each day, and each day it was lighter and lighter and lighter. And I was like, no, these are dark scenes. So I kept adjusting my exposure, because I'm assuming.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And you can hear how the stories.
No.
Oh, yeah.
And I kept calling the dailies colorist, going, dude, it looks really bright. And he went, no, this is good. This is beautiful. This has got emotion. And I'm like, no, but it's really bright. And I kept going, okay, well, all right. I kept downing my exposure, quarter of a stop, that of a stop. To the point where I'm in the error range of my meter going, ugh. So I get a call in the middle of the day going, oh, I think we figured out the problem. We left the termination switch off the VHS dubbing machine. So there's apparently a plug. So when you don't terminate it transfers the VHS a bit brighter. So I was a young DP. Luckily, we were all good, thankfully. But again, I didn't have that skill, because when I came up and through, I didn't have that experience of printer lights. Had he just given me printer lights and I knew exactly what that meant,
yes,
I would have been like, there's a problem with the VHS. But I didn't.
Yeah.
So after that point, I will say this, I got better at printer lights, because that was
I bet.
and I also got better at saying, well, this could have destroyed us, and I need to have a more robust way to view the dailies. And do we send up a print every day, and do we see it near my house, or is there a way to actually do this? But going back to the question of the technology, I feel it's giving us more choice. I feel like now, if I wanted to shoot a film on film, I could. Yes, there are inherent problems with the fact that there's not many labs out there, that the film stock is limited. But I feel like I could shoot a film on film, and I think there'd be enough skill level all around to remember how to load film and focus and all those things. But it's effectively just, I don't know, I'm excited by the possibilities that it gives storytelling, because it allows directors more choice. allows me more choice for color. Like I was saying with the grading the LEDs, it gives me more choice on a set. And I think if we start taking away choice, which is unfortunately happening with film stock because film stock's being reduced, I feel it's a sad day. You know, I respect the Nolans and Spielbergs of the world that stick to film, you know, doggedly, for right or for wrong, whatever your opinion is of that. But at least what it's doing, it's helping those things stay
as a choice.
Yeah. I mean, again, going back to you guys when you first embraced the Alexa, that was a big deal. And it meant that the Alexa became a viable option because proper films were being shot on the Alexa. And suddenly then the workflow changed. Everyone worked out how to use the Alexa and lookup tables and, you know, is it 8-bit, 10-bit, 12-bit, like whatever the output is of the Alexa. And then the next phase, the 65mm sensor, the larger sensor, which, you know, drove the LF effectively. So I don't know, I'm a strong advocate of companies that don't just try and do the next logical step forward, but try and think 5 steps down the road and do, you know, whatever we could only dream about right now.
What do you think about, though, the technology, the way the set has changed now that you have, you know, invariably the director is watching a monitor and he's not close to the camera. You know, that kind of change, and, you know, sometimes director will keep the camera running. It won't be just one take. He'll just let it go on and do multiple takes with the camera running. I mean, some people blame the technology for that. Some people say, well, that's because it's digital rather than film. But it does allow that practice, doesn't it? I don't blame the technology at all.
No, I guess it takes away some of the, I don't know how many times you've experienced this, but the amount of times where on minute 9, minute 55 on a mag, and the director's just getting the performances they need, and then you hear that horrible sound going next to your ear, and you're like, oh no, because we're just getting into it. Like it helps with those things. It removes some of the discipline, but again, it allows other things to occur. Like on Lion and on Rogue One, like we didn't want to stand there with 2 bits of wood and slap them together in front of the lens, in front of this little kid's face. You know, like we wanted the ability for sound and images to sync up together without this clap, like which some people love for good reasons. And some people are like, well, why do I need that if I'm using a digital sync and a digital box? Like I shouldn't have to do that. So it allows cameras to get smaller. It allows to be in little places that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to be with a camera, or to be unseen. Like some of the stuff we did online was in India and it was a small camera. So therefore we were hidden. Like no one knew I had a camera, you know, and I was able to capture some moments with this kid walking around the station. Where in India, if someone knows you're a film crew, you'll be mobbed. So it allows things, it takes things away. But I think if you can protect the things that it takes away, like film, like tungsten, like I wish I could find brute arcs. You know, I wish I could find old brute arcs. And
really.
So unfortunately, losing options are not great, but gaining them is something I love, and that's why with LED, I'm pushing almost as a bit of an activist to try and make sure that there's as many different LEDs out there. So when people need them, and the same with lenses for large formats, you know, because the more lenses that are available to us, the more people can then characterize lenses and create their own set for a particular end.
Right. How do you feel about monitors? I mean, I'll say what I feel, because I like the fact that there's a calibrated monitor on set. I like to be able to show a director what I'm doing in terms of lighting. I like him to be able to
know exactly
to know exactly what we're shooting and not be surprised in dailies when I say something's a silhouette and that's really a silhouette. How do you feel about monitors?
I feel for the exact same reason. It's a great thing because it means you can be ballsier, and you then don't own the choice for a ballsy decision. I feel like there are, if you're shooting film and you really want to create, it's like, we're not going to see much of their face. In fact, we'll see very little of their eyes, right? Director who's in the middle of issues with here and there. Yeah, no worries. Not seeing much of their face. Okay. And like you said, seeing dailies and Saturdays, it's like, I want to see more. It's like, dude, we can't. Like, this is.
We talked about this.
And you bought into this, and you bought into the fact that this is a funky look and this is a that. And so it helps being not thrown under the bus, effectively. That's a good way to put it. Like that they buy into it. They look at it properly, and if they do want to have more light in their face later, and you can't because you haven't exposed it, so you can lift it, or if you lift it, it looks like they're panda eyes, or at least then it's a collaborative. You all own the F-ups. You know what I mean? Like you all own the good things, and you own the bad things. So that, I think, is very right. What's not good, though, is unfortunately what it allows is every single human on set to have an opinion about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Do you get that a lot, though? I mean, I somebody was asking me that the other day. I can't think of a case where I've had a producer or somebody other than the director being looking at it and make a comment about anything I'm doing. But
you're a little scary on set, though.
I'm a little scary on set.
Because you're so focused and nobody wants to talk to you.
But do you realize that how long somebody would last in the industry if they went up to Roger Deakins and said, Roger, shouldn't your edge light be a little darker? Shouldn't you knock that back a bit? I don't think that's they might walk away from the monitor and go, oh my God, it's too bright. I guarantee that's what happens. I mean, not with you, for sure. With me, 100%. The people go, there's a monitor in the makeup station or the hair, and they're like, geez, really? That dark? Like, not that bright or something. There's always going to be chit-chat because it's human nature. So that's fine. I mean, we can not listen to that. We can be directional, but it allows everybody to have an opinion, and that follows right through, unfortunately, to the post process. Again, what Bev touched on, the change in the industry as Bev was getting out was that more directors were taking more of the lead in the grade. So, I've been fortunate enough to work with some very good collaborative directors, but there is definitely an evolution to what I've heard occurred, years ago in color labs, So I think in that sense, again, given your history and the fact that you guys are working as a team, I mean, I think that shouldn't be underestimated either, because if you've got two people fighting the same battle, you're always going to be more successful than if you've got one person. So to the power that you guys have as a team, I think it helps when you're a solo player, like a solo DP, and you're on another movie and you're trying to fight for a certain color grade, or you've only been contracted for a certain amount of time and they've got you out of there, and you're like, yeah, but I'll come back. Then you're like doing yourself. And you guys at least kind of figure that aspect out, which I think is, which is more power, because it's hard. It's really hard. That is one of the things that everyone now can do it. I mean, you can download free software and DaVinci, and you can grade your own thing on an iPad now. So if suddenly that happens, everybody has an opinion and everyone can do it. So, we are in a very interesting point in time right now in the film business, where the things that worked for you, Roger, starting out, were not the things necessarily that worked for me, that aren't necessarily the things that are going to work out. Like, it's, getting out with I would argue, and I would argue in some ways it's easier now to break through as a cinematographer or to make movies, because the technology is smaller and you can buy a small camera. But then if everybody's doing it, suddenly there's so many people doing it, and you're not the lucky one that happened to get into film school, in your case. For me, work in a film place where I could borrow film stock and borrow cameras, and there's there's no right away. But I do believe that the people that want to do it will do it, because there's a fire in people's belly. And you know, I was talking to a buddy about this on the phone, about people that I feel like they're always going to be successful regardless of what you give them. You know, that I had a friend in Melbourne who really wanted to be a cinematographer and wanted to work in the film business, and he was working at a university media department. And I was doing that first little short film I was telling you about that won at Cannes. No money. He was like, oh, I'll come and help. And I said, cool. I rang him. I said, hey, we're doing a film shoot Saturday night, you know, from 8 p.m. until 4 a.m. It's going to be really cold in Melbourne, but bring your jacket and you can be an electrician. He went, okay. Night before, he pulls out. Why? Because he had a party. He had a party to go to.
Yeah.
And I'm not discounting him. Like, listen, he's still working at that university and he's still doing that thing, and I'm sure he's happy doing it. But the thing is that the my other friend that came and helped, he's now doing stuff he wants to be doing. So it's like, it's all about fire in the belly, and commitment. It's about commitment and being, I don't know, like it's a, anyway. So yeah, I'm enjoying watching young DPs come up and what they're doing, and how a lot of people are putting film up on a pedestal. You know, Kate Arizmendi, who came on second unit, she was like putting film up on a pedestal. My assistant on Rogue One, it's like film. I'm like, interesting, isn't it? Come full circle. Like, it's gone full circle. What I have been watching is that these DPs that are shooting film are distinguishing themselves from the DPs that are not shooting film. And again, this may be a long thing, but I think there's something to be said about distinguishing oneself from somebody else in the same world. And if it's happened to be going out and shooting film, the good thing is a lot of the film they shoot is terrible. It's overexposed and it looks like crap. But that's the look that has been. That's the look that they've gone with. Yeah, that's the look they've gone with. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that there's.
Well, I think you could say that about a lot of digital as well. Sorry, but.
Yeah.
Well, it's just going out there and doing it. It's not saying what college should I go to or whatever. It's just picking up your camera and actually doing it again and again and again till you find your voice.
Find your own way of doing it as well. There's so many people just trying to kind of copy or match what they see rather than actually finding a way of doing it.
Saying, tell me how to do it instead of finding it yourself.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.